Maplewood was a town that wore its charm like a faded coat, small, quaint, and draped in nostalgia. Children played in the streets, and the scent of fresh-baked bread wafted from the bakery at the corner. Yet, as autumn descended, a chill crept into the air, carrying with it whispers of old legends. Among the townsfolk, there was a story about the old Miller house at the end of Hawthorne Lane. It stood abandoned, a decaying monument to a family that had vanished without a trace one stormy night 20 years ago. The tale claimed that the house was cursed, filled with the echoes of the past, and locals warned children to stay away. But 16-year-old Lily was never one to heed warnings. The thrill of uncovering a mystery was too alluring. Her friends Jake, Nia, and Sam finally agreed to join her in a quest to explore the Miller house. They decided to go on Halloween night, when the veil between the living and the dead was said to be thinnest. As twilight deepened, they approached the house, its silhouette looming like a dark specter against the moonlit sky. The windows were boarded up, and the door hung ajar, creaking ominously. They exchanged nervous glances but pressed on, the thrill of adventure outweighing their fears. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Their flashlights flickered against peeling wallpaper, illuminating forgotten memories, an overturned chair, a cracked mirror, and a staircase that spiraled into darkness. "Let's split up," Lily suggested, her voice trembling with excitement. "We'll cover more ground." Against their better judgment, they agreed. Lily took the upper floor, while the others stayed below. The wooden steps groaned beneath her weight as she ascended, each creak echoing in the silence. Upstairs, the hall was narrow, lined with doors that seemed to hold their breath. She pushed open the first door, revealing a child's room, frozen in time. Toys lay scattered, and a small bed was tucked in the corner, sheets yellowed with age. But it was the closet that drew her attention. A small, ornate box rested inside, its lid slightly ajar. Curiosity piqued, Lily knelt and opened it. Inside lay a collection of dusty trinkets, a locket, a cracked photo frame, and a small, hand-carved wooden figure. As she lifted the figure, a chill swept through the room, sending a shiver down her spine. She felt an unsettling presence, as if unseen eyes were watching her. "Lily," a voice called from downstairs, breaking her trance. It was Jake. "You okay?" "Yeah, just checking things out," she shouted back, trying to sound more confident than she felt. But as she turned to leave, the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. Panic surged through her. She pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers began soft at first, then rising like a crescendo of tortured souls. "Help us!" Lily pressed her ear against the door, her heart racing. The voices sounded like children pleading, crying. "What do you want?" she yelled, but only silence answered. Meanwhile, downstairs, Mia, Jake, and Sam were growing concerned. "Where is she?" Mia said, glancing up the staircase. "Let's check on her," Jake replied, but Sam hesitated. "What if she's just messing around? This place gives me the creeps." "Fine, but I'm going up there," Mia insisted, and she headed for the stairs, followed by the others. Back in the room, Lily was desperate. She banged on the door, calling for her friends. The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. "Let us out, help us." Just as despair began to set in, the door creaked open. Relief flooded over her as she stumbled into the hallway, breathless. But her relief was short-lived. The atmosphere was different. The air was thick with a malevolence that hadn't been there before. "Lily," Jake exclaimed, grabbing her arm. "What happened?" "I don't know. The door just..." It slammed shut, and then there were voices. "Voices," Sam repeated, his brow furrowed. "You sure you're okay?" Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the hall. They turned, hearts pounding, and saw the closet door swinging wide open. An unnatural cold filled the space, and shadows danced in the corners. "Let's get out of here," Mia urged, her voice shaking. They turned to flee, but the house seemed to shift around them. Doors slammed, and the whispers grew louder, swirling into a frenzy. "Help us, help us." They stumbled down the stairs, but the exit felt further away with each step. As they reached the front door, it swung shut with a force that shook the walls. Panic surged as they tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. "Lily, do something," Jake shouted, fear etched on his face. "I don't know," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It won't let us out." Suddenly, The whispers turned into screams, horrific, agonizing cries that seemed to resonate from the very foundation of the house. Lily felt a weight pressing down on her, as if the house itself was alive, hungry for the warmth of the living. In a moment of desperation, she turned to the ornate box still clutched in her hands. "You want this, take it," she yelled, throwing it into the darkness. As it shattered against the wall, a blinding light erupted, momentarily illuminating the room. The screams faded to silence, and the oppressive weight lifted. The front door swung open, revealing the quiet night outside. They didn't hesitate. With hearts racing, they bolted through the door, leaving the house behind them. As they reached the street, they dared to look back. The Miller house stood eerily silent, the windows dark, as if it had swallowed the night. In the following days, the townsfolk whispered about the 4 teenagers who had returned from the Miller house, pale and shaken. But Lily and her friends never spoke of what they had experienced that night. Years passed, and the old legends of Maplewood remained, though the whispers grew quieter. Yet sometimes, on stormy nights, if you stood outside the Miller house, you could hear the faint echoes of children calling for help, waiting for someone to listen. In the small town of Eldridge, the autumn evenings were crisp and quiet, the kind of nights that seemed to invite secrets. The locals knew each other well, but even in a tight-knit community, some stories were better left unspoken. Clara, a high school senior, often took the last bus home after long shifts at the diner. The bus route wound through the outskirts of town, where shadows stretched across abandoned fields and rusted fences. Her friends had warned her about the bus rumors swirled of odd occurrences and strange passengers. But Clara shrugged it off. She had no choice. One chilly night in October, Clara finished her shift and stepped outside into the dim glow of the streetlights. She pulled her jacket tighter around her and headed to the bus stop, where only a few flickering lights illuminated the small shelter. As she waited, Clara's phone buzzed. A text from her friend Sarah popped up. "Be careful on the bus tonight. Heard some weird stuff is happening." Clara rolled her eyes, dismissing the message. Just a few silly rumors, she thought. The bus arrived, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Clara climbed aboard, greeted by the familiar driver, an older man with a weathered face and tired eyes. He nodded at her, and she took her usual seat near the back. The interior was dimly lit, the only sounds being the engine's hum and the faint rattle of loose metal. As they pulled away from the station, Clara noticed something unusual. The bus felt emptier than usual. Just a couple of other passengers occupied the front rows, their faces hidden in the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but she brushed it aside. Midway through the route, the bus came to a stop at an isolated intersection. Clara watched as a figure emerged from the darkness, a woman, hunched and dressed in a tattered coat. The driver hesitated before opening the doors. "You sure you want to let her on?" A voice from the front muttered, barely audible. "Don't make a fuss," the driver replied, a hint of annoyance in his tone. The woman stepped on, her face obscured by a dark scarf. She shuffled to the back and sat across from Clara, her eyes glinting like shards of glass. An unsettling chill filled the air, and Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The bus resumed its journey, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The woman's gaze felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on her. She glanced around. The other passengers were now fixated on their phones, oblivious to the tension in the air. After a few minutes, the bus lurched to a stop again, this time at a stretch of road surrounded by dense woods. The driver leaned back, clearly agitated. "We don't stop here," he said, looking into the rearview mirror. "Just a moment," the woman said, her voice raspy. "I need to get off." The driver sighed, and Clara's heart raced. "No one gets off here. It's not safe." "I don't care," the woman snapped, her voice sharp. "Let me off." The atmosphere grew thick with unease. Clara's palms felt clammy, and she leaned closer to the window, trying to avoid the woman's intense gaze. The other passengers still seemed lost in their screens, as if the tension didn't touch them. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed against the side of the bus. Clara jumped, her heart pounding. The driver looked startled, then furious. "What was that?" he shouted, glancing out the window. The woman stood, her eyes wide and wild. "Let me off, please." Before the driver could respond, the bus lights flickered. The interior plunged into darkness for a moment, and Clara felt a jolt of fear. She clutched her phone, desperately pressing the button for the flashlight. When the lights flickered back on, the woman was gone. The back of the bus was empty, the space where she had sat eerily vacant. Clara gasped, looking around, and saw the other passengers finally glancing up, confusion etched on their faces. "What just happened?" one of them asked, but Clara could only shake her head. The driver was tense, hands gripping the wheel. "We're leaving," he muttered, speeding off into the night. The bus rattled over the uneven road, and Clara felt her heart race. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the next stop. Clara hurriedly stepped off, her legs shaky. She turned back just in time to see the bus pull away, the driver's expression distant, lost in thought. The night air was cold, and the silence around her felt suffocating. As she walked the familiar path home, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The woods loomed to her left, dark and foreboding. She quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder. Did she imagine the thump, the woman's gaze? Just as she reached her street, Clara spotted a figure standing at the edge of the trees, partially hidden in the shadows. It was a woman in a tattered coat, staring right at her. Panic surged through Clara. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop until she reached her front door, fumbling with her keys. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, gasping for breath. In the safety of her home, Clara tried to calm herself. She pulled out her phone to call Sarah, but froze when she saw the missed notifications. The last one was from a group chat with her friends. "Did you hear? Someone went missing after the last bus last night. They found her coat in the woods." Chills ran down Clara's spine. She glanced out the window, where the night stretched endlessly, dark and silent. She would never take the last bus home again. In the small town of Brooksville, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, there was a persistent chill in the air that seemed to linger, even in the warmest months. The townsfolk often spoke in hushed tones about the woods that bordered the town, particularly about the old trail that wound deep into the trees. It was said that those who ventured too far. Evelyn had lived in Brooksville all her life, but she had never dared to explore the woods. The stories had kept her at bay, fueled by her grandmother's warnings about the eyes that watch from the darkness. As a teenager, the thrill of the unknown pulled at her curiosity. Now, at 23, she felt the need to confront her childhood. One evening, after a long day at the local diner, Evelyn decided it was time. She grabbed her flashlight and a jacket, determined to explore the old trail before sunset. The air was thick with anticipation as she approached the tree line, her heart racing. The path was narrow, overgrown with weeds and roots that twisted like fingers. As she walked deeper into the woods, the sounds of the town faded. The chirping of crickets and rustling leaves replaced the familiar sounds of home. An unsettling silence settled around her, broken only by her footsteps. After about 30 minutes, she reached a clearing. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground. Evelyn paused, taking a deep breath. The beauty of the woods was undeniable, but something felt off. A chill ran down her spine as she noticed something in the distance, a figure standing among the trees. She squinted, trying to make sense of what she saw. The figure was tall and slender, its outline shrouded in darkness. Fear gripped her, and she fought the urge to turn and run. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response. Curiosity pushed her forward, but caution pulled her back. Just as she took a step closer, the figure disappeared into the woods, blending seamlessly with the shadows. Her heart raced, and an instinct told her to leave, but something compelled her to stay. As night began to fall, the air grew colder, and the woods took on an ominous presence. Evelyn turned to leave, but as she retraced her steps, she felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. It was as if she were being watched. She quickened her pace, but the feeling intensified. Suddenly, she heard a soft whisper that seemed to echo from all directions. Stay with us." Panic surged through her. She picked up her pace to a run, branches snapping underfoot as she dashed down the path. The whispers grew louder, mingling with the rustling leaves, becoming a chorus of pleading voices. "Stay. Don't leave." Evelyn burst through the tree line, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stumbled back into town. The familiar sights of Brooksville grounded her, but the fear still clung to her. She glanced back toward the woods, heart pounding. That night, she lay in bed, haunted by the encounter. Sleep eluded her, and as the hours dragged on, she kept hearing that whisper. It became a haunting melody in her mind, pulling at her to return. Days turned into weeks, but the fear faded, replaced by an insatiable curiosity. What had she seen that night? What had been calling to her? Finally, she resolved to go back, this time with a friend. She convinced Mark, her closest friend, to join her. He was skeptical but agreed to keep her company. As they walked the trail together, the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a warm glow. Evelyn felt a mixture of excitement and dread. When they reached the clearing, Evelyn hesitated. "This is where I saw it," she said, glancing around. Mark raised an eyebrow, looking unimpressed. "Come on, Eve. There's nothing here," he said, rolling his eyes. But just as she was about to retort, they both froze. From the depths of the woods came that same whisper, more urgent this time. "Stay. Stay with us." Mark's face paled, and he grabbed Evelyn's arm. "Let's go," he said, his voice low. But she felt rooted to the spot, entranced by the sound. The whispers grew louder, weaving through the trees like a tangible force. Shadows danced around them, flickering just out of reach. Mark pulled her toward the path, but Evelyn resisted. "No, I need to know what it is." Before he could respond, the figure she had seen before emerged from the trees, a tall, gaunt silhouette with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. "Stay," it murmured, extending a long, spindly hand. Mark shouted, "Evelyn, run!" He yanked her back, and they turned to flee, the whispers turning into frantic cries. "Stay with us, you can't leave." They sprinted through the woods, the air thick with terror. Branches snagged at their clothes, and the path twisted like a maze. Just as they thought they might escape, the ground beneath them gave way to a pit, and they stumbled into darkness. Evelyn hit the ground hard, her flashlight flickering before going out. Panic set in as she scrambled to her feet, searching for Mark. "Mark," she called, but only silence answered. In the pitch black, the whispers returned, echoing in the confined space. "Stay. Stay with us." Frantically, Evelyn felt around, trying to find a way out. The walls were damp and close, and the air felt suffocating. Just when despair threatened to swallow her, she saw a faint glow above. With renewed determination, she climbed, using every ounce of strength to reach the surface. When she finally emerged into the moonlight, she gasped for air, but the clearing was empty. Mark was gone. Days turned into weeks again, but Brooksville felt different. The woods loomed like a dark sentinel, and Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her every move. One night, she returned to the diner where she worked, and as she served a group of customers, she noticed a familiar face, among them a gaunt figure, standing at the edge of the shadows. Her heart raced as she caught a glimpse of hollow eyes staring back at her. "Stay," it whispered, and Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. The woods had claimed another soul, and she realized she might not be able to leave. The whispers would follow her, a reminder that some encounters in small towns linger longer than they should, binding you to the darkness forever. Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of our story. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you have similar stories you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.